So, welcome to the online series Behind the Scenes, Empirical Research and Platform Governance. Today, we're welcoming Blake Hallinan and CJ Reynolds from Hebrew University. Paloma will introduce them later on properly. I start with saying a few things about the online talk series. I see many familiar faces, but there may be also some people who are here for the first time. So just a few notes. We've started the online talk series almost 2 years ago with the idea of bringing the community together in this field of platform governance research to talk about methods, to talk about data, and to more broadly reflect on our empirical research. I think we all know and have encountered the many challenges that we are facing in this space when it comes to collecting data, getting people to interview, finding social media content, talking to the platforms and whatever. And the idea of this series is to talk actually about these challenges in our research and as an essential part of our research. So we're looking for and inviting presentations that do not only kind of present the polished results that come out of this research, but we want to ask ourselves here and together, how do we do that? What are the challenges? How do we find ways around it? What are the pitfalls and what are maybe some strategies to mitigate some of those problems, to, in other words, look behind the scenes of our research and talk as a community about these things. And we are now at, I believe, session 14 with Blake and CJ, and I'm really looking forward to your talk. Yes, and with that, I hand over to Paloma.
So welcome everyone. This is session number 15, if I am not wrong. And as you know, today we have Blake and CJ who are coming with a talk called Malcontents as Method, how bad actors offer an alternative vision of good governance on social media, in which they made the case for staying with the troublemakers. I love that line from the abstract. So Blake is a senior lecturer in the Department of Communications and Journalism at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, affiliate on the European Research Council funded Digital Values project, who researches participatory platform governance. And CJ is a PhD candidate, soon to be a doctor at the Department of Communication and Journalism at the Hebrew University at Jerusalem, and is researching accountability and trust in a state and platform context. So the floor is yours.
A little A, a little B. CJ, are you sharing for us?
Sharing now. There we go.
Great. So we're really looking forward to talking to you. Wait, I forgot. I was like, I'm gonna keep to the time. Let's get started. Slight change to our title slide. Instead of one alternative vision, we have pluralized it. So we think that there's not just one here. Thank you. Here is our agenda. We'll start with some introductions, present the dominant vision of platform governance and platform governance research, and then get into malcontent methodology, meeting the malcontents, and malcontent methods. I promise this will not be just word salad once we get to it. So, introductions. We've already had a lovely introduction here, so I won't belabor the point, but I am Blake Hallinan, and for the purposes of this talk, I will be your methods guy.
And I am CJ Reynolds, and for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to be the culture guy.
Great. This is building on work that we have done. Some of it is already published. So we've got our earlier study on the haunting of GeoCities and the politics of access control on the earlier web, and two more recent ones looking at YouTube and creators, which we'll draw a little bit more heavily on today. One, user-generated accountability, public participation in algorithmic governance on YouTube, and two, copyright callouts and the promise of creator-driven platform governance. I encourage you to check these out if you find what we are saying interesting, but we'll also be integrating in some other stuff that we've been working on, which was a bit concerning to list in one place. Please enjoy our comforting Pikachu under construction GIF next to it. We won't go through all of the projects here, but we'll present them as needed. So, the dominant vision of platform governance. I think that Robert Gorwa's account of the platform governance status quo does a very nice job presenting this as the set of legal, political, and economic relationships structuring interactions between users, technology companies, governments, and other key stakeholders in the platform ecosystem. And the kind of platform governance triangle we have here with states, non-governmental organizations, and firms holding down the anchors are often who we are looking at when we are doing platform governance research. So sometimes we have our governance of platforms. What are the state and NGOs doing to shape this? Sometimes we have governance by platforms. What is the platform doing to the conditions of the users who exist upon it? But we think that there is, and we're obviously not the only ones, part of the conversation that is missing here. So I love this piece on creator governance from Cunningham and Craig, who basically ask, were there creators in all of this? There are some versions of creator organizing that are represented in the non-governmental organization. So like there is some formal organizing that people take place in to advocate for their rights. Some of it is like proto attempts at unionization, other industry lobbying groups, especially with all of the recent regulations going about for social media. But there is also forms of self-governance, of informal organizing, and other kinds of mechanisms that, like governance that is existing on platforms that is neither by platforms or of platforms. So that's kind of what this creator governance space is looking at. But even here, it remains very solution-oriented, a lot of the literature, at least as we see it. So sometimes it's about formal organizing solutions, taking a really like a labor perspective, forms of unionization, lobbying, industry associations, intermediaries that can improve conditions for creators on the platform. There is also interest in policy solutions. So making direct recommendations for content moderation. What kind of interventions can we do here? How should policies be changed? How should enforcement be changed? And sometimes also policy recommendations at the state level as well. And design solutions. This is kind of most pronounced in the information science side. CSCW work kind of leads the way on this, but it's also more broadly taken up by other kind of platform studies scholars, where we're looking at like the interface design, reporting features, personal and collective tools for moderation. And solutions are good or can be good, but it is also something that feels a bit like speaking into the void, like these are solutions no one is asking for and no one is acting upon. And also that that's not all that's going on here. So the conclusion here from Tarleton's essay of that social science researchers, it need not be our job to solve the problems these industries have created, at least not on the terms in which they offer them, is one that we take to heart. So what we are trying to do is unsettle ideas about what is platform governance and what is good platform governance or good governance in a platform context. Which brings us to malcontent methodology. And I will warn you, I think we have more to say methodologically than we do methods-wise. We're not that innovative on that approach, but the orientation we think to doing this research is one that is not broadly represented in the field, and I think it has a lot to offer. So in putting together this perspective, we're drawing on some big hitters here. I'll go through each of these kind of four touchstone books that are shaping how we are thinking about this. The first, as you may have gathered from the title that we selected, is Chen's Asia as method. And here it's the idea that knowledge construction is really shaped by who you are in conversation with, what you take as the salient points of referencing. And so interreferencing as a strategy for theory building is one that we try to look to different actors who are not part of an established conversation. Next, Sarah Ahmed's complaint, and how complaints and people who are making them and the content thereof that is being expressed through the complaint itself helps us understand power and institutional dynamics. We look at a lot of complaints. The callouts are very much a particular expression of this. Some throwback political theory, hegemony and socialist strategy from Leclau and Mouffe, something that CJ and I may be bringing here from our former days as debate partners together. But basically, the idea here is that one way power plays out is over fixing hegemonic practices and meanings. And so the hegemonic understanding of platform governance is one that we see as itself a site of power contestation. And finally, some actor network theory. In doing all of this work, how do you see it? Where do you go? We take insight from following the actors and studying society, or in this case, governance, as forms of shifting associations. And just like a little bonus article from, I think, 2004, Infrastructures and Their Discontents, Implications for Ubicomp. Remember when we were all talking about Ubicomp and ubiquitous computing? I do. It's great. But this is a delightful little essay that looks at trying to understand ubiquitous computing or infrastructures from the people, the populations for whom infrastructure becomes a matter of daily effort and engagement instead of hidden forces. And they look at homeschoolers and us not so much, but we find other people who meet this criteria. So we turn to the troublemakers, or stay with the trouble, to kind of riff on Haraway's phrasing. I was having a lot of fun writing this abstract. So malcontent. OED definition, a discontented person, especially one who is disaffected or actively discontented, or inclined to resistance or rebellion. We are thinking in a platform context as those who are, by circumstance or choice, occupying a position of antagonism to content moderation or other forms of conventional platform governance. And we see two methodological advantages to this. The first is diagnosing conventional mechanisms of platform governance. What's going on here? How is it playing out? What are the kind of costs or normative commitments? And then the second one is to uncover unconventional mechanisms of platform governance, things that we would not necessarily recognize as such. My turn to chill out.
Yes, and with that, I turn to introducing you to some of the archetypes of what we see as the malcontents that we use in our current, published and ongoing studies. I do have my dog barking his head off in the background, so I apologize if that comes through. Great. Thank you, Zoom. Thank you, Zoom, very much. But we're going to look at four different archetypes today of some of the malcontents that we have identified that we think offer different orientations towards how we understand the malcontents as a methodology. The first one we want to talk about is what we call the opinion leader. And our archetype here is Charles White, or moist critical. And the sort of line we offer for what the opinion leader does is, I just wanted to talk about this. And that's what moist critical does, is take up various issues of current conversation in culture, internet, and mainstream, and discuss them on his platforms, which are quite large. He has 16.5 million YouTube subs, 5.6 million Twitch followers, and 2.7 million X followers. So this gives him quite a big platform to talk about whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And at times, this is directly aimed at the platforms. He's able to leverage the size of this platform to directly talk to the larger scale platforms that we're interested in platform studies. This, for example, is a time where he made YouTube admit publicly on Twitter that they were wrong about a community strike that they had given him, saying, "Update, we're not going to die on this hill. You were right." This is an extremely rare concession from YouTube or from any platform to publicly take responsibility for getting a piece of content moderation so very wrong, but it was only able to happen because Moist Critical serves as an opinion leader for those who feel that content moderation was not working properly on YouTube. This is part of the article that we wrote on user-generated accountability, which, as Blake noted in the intro, is published in New Media and Society. And we define user-generated accountability as the generation of publicity via content creation itself to reveal failures, oversights, or harmful policies. So in this article, we were particularly interested in complaints about the platform that took place on the platform itself, or in other words, YouTube creators using the very skills that they've leveraged to build themselves livelihoods and audiences, using those audiences and skills to turn against the platform. And taking up this term opinion leader, we're obviously drawing directly from Katz and Lazarsfeld and the model that they present of the two-step flow of communication, where opinions flow from the mass media to opinion leaders who then distribute them to followers. But of course, we're not necessarily talking about the mass media in this case. Rather, we're talking more about the opinions or the positions, the policy creations of things like platform corporate leadership. And we also feel like there is a unique wrinkle to having creators as opinion leaders, which is something Blake has talked about in recent work on the idea of parasocial media, that these creators have a different position than perhaps opinion leaders within your local community do in terms of having a certain amount of distance from the people they're talking to, and yet also being able to construct feelings of intimacy with these audiences that still make them effective as opinion leaders. This has been very potent for somebody like Moist Critical, who, as you saw in the opening picture, is somebody who a lot of his content involves swinging around on giant dildos or doing other kinds of dumb YouTube content. And yet, at the same time, he was able to secure a personal phone call from the CEO of YouTube in response to his complaints on X about incorrect content moderation on the platform. And in that call, he actually even proposed a policy solution, a new design option for YouTube, where he proposed letting creators edit out potentially offending content if they received a community guideline strike. This turned out to be something that several years later, YouTube themselves actually implemented as a new feature and is now standard on the platform for people to be able to do. So we see real effects from this opinion leader making noise as one of our malcontents and actually achieving clear policy changes through this process of user-generated accountability. So he just wants to talk about things. And as this kind of malcontent, he largely believes that platform rules should be common sense and applied fairly and equally. This is a very mainstream sort of centrist position among malcontents as we're looking at them. These are people who are more contingent types of malcontents. They will complain when a problem arises, but otherwise are not generally people who are causing problems for platforms. He also believes that bad behavior by any actor should be addressed publicly if necessary for accountability, which means that this is sort of an open season type of malcontent, not aimed just at the platform, but at all people who might need noise to be made at them in order to be held accountable. And he acts as a challenger. He asks, is this a hill you want to die on? So this is the opinion leader type of malcontent that we found useful for understanding how people leverage accountability as a kind of contingent and situational process. This contrasts strongly with what we call the reluctant protester. And these are people who are malcontents very much by circumstance because they don't actually want to be malcontents at all. They would rather not talk about the problems that they face with content moderation or the platforms, but are occasionally put back to the wall into the very position of having to do so. Our example here is Corey X. Kinchin. And Corey published what it turned out to be a very popular video calling out YouTube's content moderation systems, including their employees, for what he perceived as racism and favoritism operating through the content moderation decisions that came down on his content versus the content of his non-Black peers in the gaming space on YouTube. Corey's a very big creator. He's perhaps the biggest creator, biggest Black creator on YouTube, especially in the gaming space. He has 21 million YouTube subs, 2.1 million X followers. And this video ended up going to #1 on YouTube's trending list almost as soon as it was published. So this hit mainstream news as well as becoming the talking point for a large population of the YouTube creator body at that time. We see Corey as representing a kind of malcontent who's operating under the idea of aspirational platform governance, which is ongoing work that we hope will be coming out soon in Internet Policy Review. And we understand aspirational platform governance as the desire to influence content moderation policies and practices without established channels or guarantees of success. When Corey publishes this video calling out YouTube for racism, he has no real policy change to suggest, because don't be racist when interacting with creators is not necessarily a clear policy change. Likewise, he doesn't know if it will ever reach the correct ears or really even draw attention from his audience, which is normally a fairly wholesome audience of people watching gaming footage. However, this video ends up getting taken up in the YouTube discourse quite heavily. It becomes the subject of quite a lot of reaction videos, which are the type of videos that will watch Corey's initial content and add their own opinions in as they are live reacting to this moment. This spreads quite a ways across very big creators, like you see Jacksepticeye and Moist Critical up top, who are some of the biggest creators on YouTube, even down to very small creators, people with less than 1,000 subs who just want to share their own experiences, given that this is the trending topic on YouTube at the moment. And ultimately, we find that there's rather mixed reception towards what Corey is arguing in his video about racism and favoritism on YouTube. We find quite high agreement across demographic categories that there is bias on YouTube, that there are forms of favoritism, and that content moderation policies are not applied equally to all creators. However, people are much more ambivalent, much more tacit about agreeing with the claim that there might be racism involved in these particular decisions. And the overwhelming group who does end up agreeing with Corey is his own demographic of Black men. So this tells us that this kind of malcontent does have people who want to engage with it. It does have effects on the overall discourse, but also doesn't have a clear policy agenda and doesn't have necessarily a clear outcome, because that's not necessarily what this kind of malcontent is aiming for. We see this reluctant protester archetype as somebody who wants to be able to create content and community with a minimum of friction. They do not generally want to speak up about problems or content moderation. Making noise for them is a very last resort. And indeed, Corey had already gone through all of his personal context at YouTube, the YouTube appeal system, and everything really that a creator can try behind the scenes before he made this video public. So these people end up being a kind of advocate. They pop up only when they feel that there's an injustice that can't be ignored. They're extremely circumstantial and contingent, and generally stop making noise about content moderation or platform governance once they've aired their concerns about that particular issue. And indeed, Corey has not made any other videos of this type since that time, instead returning to his gaming roots. That contrasts pretty strongly with our next archetype, which we call the provocateur. And for provocateurs, pushing boundaries on platforms is just good business. And he returned as an archetype to the creator Amaranth, who has been one of the biggest Twitch, Kick, and OnlyFans creators in the live streaming space for some years now. Amaranth is especially famous for her role in popularizing what was known as the hot tub meta on Twitch, where streamers would set up inflatable hot tubs in their living rooms because Twitch had a policy that allowed people to only be in swimwear if they were actually in an area that required swimwear, so say a hot tub or a pool or a beach. Their way of getting around the rules that normally forbid people from being in swimwear just to stream by making sure they had a hot tub present. Amaranth is a fairly massive creator, especially within the live streaming space. 6.2 million Twitch followers and X followers. And importantly, she is also a top 10 only in terms of earnings. Been in trouble with Twitch and other platforms so many times that there's an entire cottage industry among the game's media about tracking and explaining to normal people why she has been banned yet again. You can see at least 9 times she's been banned from Twitch for violating some portion of the TOS, at least according to Twitch. But this only benefits Amaranth because what she does is she uses her bans to then take the people who want to continue watching her and funnel them instead to OnlyFans, where she has about 57 million the last 4 years. And that's not counting Kick and Twitch earnings, which themselves are also in the multi-millions. We study this idea. This is a solo paper, actually, where I'm studying Twitch metas, which I define as content that optimizes the balance between a streamer's time and effort and their ability to garner an audience and make money. And this often rests upon them pushing the boundaries of new ideas for what content can be. Because if you're doing the same normal content that's allowed by the platform and what everybody else is doing, you're not optimizing. But if you're the one doing something new and quite possibly something risque, there is a lot more to be gained by pushing the boundaries of the TOS or content moderation rules. And indeed, Amaranth has followers. This, for instance, is Morgpie, who was well known for piloting the green screen meta, where she would indeed play games on Twitch, as one might expect, but only by using a green screen that was positioned on her own particular body parts. She explained why she did this to the games media, that people have been trying to find ways to poke holes in the terms of service for a decade on Twitch. And, that's why Amaranth is as wealthy as she is. People see that, and they see the success that can be made from doing things like what Amaranth did with the hot tub streams. Twitch will find ways to include this kind of content on their platform. You can watch, or you don't have to watch, but ultimately it is allowed. And indeed, Amaranth and the other metas, boundary pushers, the provocateurs, won this battle with Twitch, who ultimately created an entirely new content category devoted only to pools, hot tubs, and beaches streams in order to accommodate and keep this kind of content on their platform, even though they initially banned Amaranth for doing this. So for these creators, pushing boundaries is just good business. They are malcontents in the economic sense because it actually benefits them and because they're also people very good at following the letter of the law rather than the spirit of the law. Because the letter of the law was that you could only wear bathing suits if you were in hot tubs or pools, they made sure they could have hot tubs in their homes in front of their streaming setups. The letter of the law was indeed followed. They also seek to incentivize platforms to change rules, as they ultimately did with Twitch in this case, by demonstrating that breaking whatever the current spirit of the rules are could benefit the platforms. They feel that they can create cultural and policy change by this boundary pushing activity. This makes them disruptors. And indeed, Amaranth herself has quoted Mark Zuckerberg on this point: move fast and break things. That is what they see as their role as malcontent creators on platforms. Finally, we turn to the one I think you all are going to like the least, which is the willing degenerate. And our archetype here is one Aidan Ross, who will do almost anything, perhaps literally anything, for the content. I think the best way to introduce you to Aidan Ross is to let him do it in his own words.
What does a fascist mean? It means you are a far-right authorization on ultra-analytic, oh my God, ultra-analyst, political ideology movement characterized by dictator leadership, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition. So I don't know what that means, right? I swear to God. I don't know what the fuck a fascism is. I don't know what the fuck that is.
On the internet today. Well, with 7.2 million Twitch followers before he was banned from the platform, you'll see why soon. 1.5 million followers on rival platform Kick, which was started just a couple of years ago, and 2.6 million X followers. And Aidan Ross has been quite infamous as the willing degenerate, the guy who will do anything for content for a number of different things, including, for instance, opening the homepage of Pornhub on his stream full of underage viewers, for streaming the Super Bowl illegally, and perhaps worst of all, for trying to incentivize his viewers to take on sadistic pranks in exchange for payment. It included in things like asking the viewer to pee on his sister while she was sleeping, making a viewer use pepper spray on himself, shave his head, and drink hot sauce on camera, and asking one of his viewers to slit his brother's throat for being a fan of a rival content creator. Now, of course, these are pretty egregious, as you might expect. He was banned for doing this. No, wait, no, that's wrong. Sorry, wrong notes here. He wasn't banned. He actually got to interview Donald Trump on stream during the 2024 election campaign. So Adin Ross is actually one of your leading political influencers. Congratulations. We are interested in Adin Ross in particular as part of an ongoing piece that we are working on in terms of creator cartels, which we define as contingent alliances between creators that are leveraged to produce beneficial policy and economic outcomes. And we see these as in direct contrast to the, frankly, continuous failure of creators to be able to establish lasting or influential union movements. Instead, we think that creators come together for particular issues and under circumstances that directly benefit themselves in contingent groupings. So Adin Ross we look at as part of a pro-gambling group who was arguing for gambling, live stream gambling, to continue to be allowed on the Twitch platform when it came under controversy against a rival group of streamers who operate as the opposing cartel in this instance. Now, in the end, the anti-gambling streamers end up winning on Twitch. Twitch does change its rules to at least limit some of the most popular forms of gambling on the platform. But at the same time, the gambling streamers win because they found a new rival platform to Twitch called Kick, which is not only in favor of gambling, it is directly owned and sponsored by an online crypto casino. Adin Ross, you might think, is just a problem for the streaming space. And indeed, he does collaborate with some of the biggest mainstream streamers like IShowSpeed or Kai Cenat. But his sort of willing degeneracy is extremely popular and draws in people from many different parts of the culture, including music. He's collaborated with sports stars like Bronny James and John Jones. And of course, his role in what we might look at as alt-right politics, not just with Donald Trump, but his close associates with Andrew Tate and platforming the white supremacist Nick Fuentes as well. Anything for the content, do it for the content, as the willing degenerate. These people believe that platforms and creators should let audiences decide what they want to see. In other words, the role of content moderation is basically to enforce only what is mandated by law, if that, and otherwise to leave people to make their own decisions online. So they believe that being ungovernable is a cultural good. This is a very willing lean into all of the worst things one could do on stream for the entertainment value, for the content, but also for the political aspect of resisting governance. This is a sort of rebel archetype for us. Ban me, I dare you. Some platforms have, like Twitch, very much have not still. He is still online. So when we talk about orient studies around malcontents, we have a few takeaways. One being that bad actors productively refuse platforms' definitions of the problem of content moderation. They do that in different ways, as you can see through our different archetypes. And in doing so, they surface different and often counterintuitive kinds of problems than do the vast majority of online actors who largely follow the rules and may only occasionally deviate from content moderation guidelines. They're also increasingly skilled at making little problems into big problems, which is what happens when you media train your troublemakers and pay them lots of money to make trouble on your platforms. They provide also, we believe, a useful corrective to tendencies that we've seen recently in creator studies literature, social movements literature, and platform studies literature itself towards lionizing the perspectives of creators, activists, and just in general, the little guys. Obviously, we all understand the value of resisting things like states and platforms from below, but at the same time, there are bad actors on platforms. There are people who are doing things that we would rather they not do, and thus not all creator perspectives are perhaps made equally. These four archetypes demonstrate for us that malcontents can offer scholars different orientations towards platform governance questions, that malcontents is not just sort of one method, but it is a multitude of different perspectives that we can gain by looking towards the bad actors online and how they ultimately see themselves as bad actors or embrace or try to disavow that narrative of themselves. So with that, we're going to turn to a few practical tips for you in terms of actual methods that we use to study malcontents, including how to identify them, how to diagnose these problems, and how to map unconventional platform governance forms. In terms of ethnographic lurking as the culture guy, these are my primary tips. One is to watch the watering holes. You have to find out where these people gather and where major discussions happen. For instance, for the live streaming space, somewhere like Reddit's r live stream fails is a major aggregator for what's going on in live streaming in any given moment and what people are actually interested in. We also think that you need to sift through drama. Drama is actually very important in online spaces and especially in creator spaces. So embracing what Lewis and Kristen talk about with platform drama, we think that the T channels have a lot of insight here. We also want you to note the insights of vagabond ethnographers, which Wisniewski talks about as people who are marginal groups within the culture who have to understand the culture and navigate it in order to survive within it. So they're within the culture, but not necessarily of the culture. These sorts of insider but outsider voices can be very useful in helping scholars to navigate what's actually going on in spaces and understanding the history of those spaces. And the last thing is that you should data hoard, because guess what? Malcontents frequently get kicked off platforms. If you want to have a record of what's been going on, you need to have that hoarded in your own hard drives.
So if those are ways of identifying some of these actors, then I bring a little bit more to the table in diagnosing the forms of content moderation and the different normative commitments involved into it. And a lot of these conversations are very evaluative. They're opinion leaders. What are those opinions? What are the values that they're bringing to it? And there are some theoretical frameworks that I think are helpful, whether you're studying interviews, content on social media, ethnographic observations that can inform your analysis. So things like ethical work or the kind of sociology of justifications. We're also drawing kind of heavily on controversy mapping. Who are the different parties? What are their positions? How do their messages spread? And the kind of infrastructural inversion idea here. What are things, what are these moments of disruption, and what does that reveal about the ordinary operations that we otherwise take for granted? And then, like if that's the diagnostic, the mapping is trying to see what else is happening in the governance space that we might not recognize as governance. So like the reaction videos that CJ mentioned are an established cultural practice, but not one that we typically think of as kind of governance. And the same with many of like the call-out videos, other things that we're looking at are what we position as informal organizing strategies. And here it's kind of they follow the actors here, so following cross-platform flows. Any kind of platform contestation is not happening exclusively within the domain of that platform. YouTubers going to Twitter X to make their concerns known and mobilize different audiences is a good example of this, but there are all kinds of other enclave spaces, the subreddits about particular topics, your discords, your other kind of closed environments. I think also that organization studies has a lot to offer us here in thinking about informal practices as forms of response, as forms of power negotiation. And finally, we've highlighted the archetypes in the most high profile, most visible form, but they're not the only people that we are looking at. There are very relevant peripheral actors here that are playing key roles in mobile audiences in their fan communities. So your moderator, your fan club actors, who else is involved behind the scenes? So these are little tips and tricks, but the bigger issue that we're trying to bring together is thinking about what is governance, how it operates. So we will stop here to allow conversation, and we're really looking forward to it.